And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Midweek Live. I am just switching over to the correct Wi-Fi so I can post on my Twitter to let everybody know that I'm here. Because otherwise, you won't know, will you? Or you will know because you're the early bird, so you're here on time. How are you all? Are you well? Okay, so what should we talk about today? We can talk about whatever you like, really. I've got a few things I'd like to discuss with you. I want to get your thoughts, because obviously there's some news, there's some things that have, been announced. Chimaev Covington, how's that going to go? I was just having a look. I typed UFC news into my Google machine and thought to myself, I'll see if there's anything brand new that's just happened right before we go live. And this pops up. Arizona Boxing Commission calls emergency meeting. Fate of Anderson Silva hangs in the balance. Of course, this is referring to his upcoming fight against Jake Paul, which I've already done a war room on, so I won't get too much into the details. Make sure you do check that out. I'm a little bit concerned for him as well, but I'm not that concerned. I'm not concerned enough for them to not let him fight. I mean, he's 37. He's just been the distance with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I think he's more than capable of stepping in there and doing himself justice against Jake Paul. Doesn't mean he might not get knocked out, because of course that is potentially going to happen. But I'd be interested to know what the decision around that is and why. I mean, I've literally just seen. So they've got a meeting Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. So we'll see. We'll see what happens about that. What I will say though is, if Anderson Silva isn't able to fight, they should probably just call Sam Alvey. Sam Alvey has been gunning for a fight with Jake Paul since he got released by the UFC. And I think he would be an absolute nightmare of a fight for Jake Paul. I think he would be hilarious as an opponent as well. And I think they should keep him in the back of their mind, because, Sam Alvey can take a hell of a shot. Of course, he's on a bit of a rough skid. I was just looking at his record, actually. 1-8-1 in his last 10. But, big dude, tough, fought at middleweight, light heavyweight, 53 professional MMA fights, fought fairly recently. When was that? August. I'd put him in there. Okay. That is one thing that we will obviously keep an eye on as the show continues, and hopefully something will come of that, and we'll know what's happening with Anderson Silva. Oh, Jamie's phone. I would like to see the fight happen personally. I really would, because I think that it's an interesting one. I think what Anderson Silva has lost in the years of age, I think he makes up for in the fact that he's got the wisdom. And if anything stands out about the heavyweight division, it's wisdom pays off. You get fighters that are later in their career, in their ages, that are doing much better. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think Anderson Silva's got a lot of wisdom, and he's got a lot of experience. And Jake Paul's he's a young kid. He's not going to be nearly on the level that Anderson Silva has fought before. It's just the question of whether he takes him seriously and starts clowning or not. Question from Josh Saunders. What happened to the fight with Diego Sanchez? Yeah. It was supposed to be November 12, but then the card got picked up by Sky Sports. I don't know whether this is common news yet. I'm not sure whether they've even announced it. The card got picked up by Sky Sports, and they decided that they wanted the Ricky Hatton, Marco Antonio Barrera to top a card that they were making out of their boxers. So, unfortunately, it's no longer happening. Of course, Diego is constantly calling me out, trying to get something else to fight me, some other rule set to fight me under, but as of right now, yeah, it's not happening. It's not happening. It's a little bit frustrating, especially because it's the same thing that happened last time. I had literally just finished the training session. I'm like, feel pretty good. I'm looking forward to this fight, and then the news comes through. So yeah, very disappointing. But thanks for the question, Josh. I appreciate it. Kevin, do you think Colby will make it? He's known to be a diva. Remember how long it took him to fight Woodley? This is the top of my list of things to talk about, Chimaev Covington, because I think if Chimaev had not fought Gilbert Burns, I think Covington would be far more reluctant to fight him. I think because Colby's seen Chimaev tired, it will give him the confidence that he can get him tired. You know, I've quoted this to you before, I'm sure, but it was something that Gregor Gillespie said in one of his recent post-fight interviews. And he was talking about, I knew I had to get myself tired to get him tired. And I think that Colby, that's his optimum state. Like, borderline fatigue for Colby is absolute fatigue for almost everybody else. It takes a very, very well-conditioned, disciplined, mature fighter to be able to keep the same pace as Colby, especially over 5 rounds. And of course, this has got to be over 5 rounds. They can't put this as anything other than a main event. It would be silly to not have this as a headliner. My immediate thought is that I feel Covington is going to be able to withstand whatever he throws at him for 10 minutes and then be able to start turning it on Chimaev. I mean, the thing is, Chimaev is we just don't know where he's at, what he's doing. I don't know what he's training or if he's training. I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty around Chimaev right now, and I have more questions about whether he makes it to the fight than anything else. If I'm absolutely honest, I think Colby's ready to get back in there. I think he's ready to reestablish his brand, and I think someone like Chimaev, you know, of course it's a big risk fighting him, but at the same time, I feel like Colby knows that especially if this is over 5 rounds, Colby's going to feel like he can withstand and be able to get to that the last 2 rounds, the 4th and 5th. He could take a hell of a shot, Colby can. There's no doubt about it. And I think as long as he doesn't get hit or taken down and dominated and really damaged in the first round, then I think we might see him come out on top in a decision. James Warner, do you think Chimaev's cardio is affected from weight cut? It's a good question. I mean, I don't know how much he cuts weight. He seems to me, I mean, at least when he was in Fight Island the first time, he seemed to me like he was about 8 or 10 pounds above 170 at the time. But I do think he has filled out recently, and I do think that he's, you know, the longer it is between his fights, the more likely he's going to be too heavy and too big. I think he's destined to be a middleweight anyway. And Covington he's at that size and weight where really, if there was a 162 or a 165 division, Colby would probably fit right in there perfectly. Chimaev is definitely right at the top end of welterweight, and I just think that, like, sometimes people's body types are just not right for 5 rounds in that weight class. I think that's what we knew about. About Zabit. You know, I think if you remember, obviously he was going to fight Calvin Kattar in a main event, and that was not over 5 rounds. That was over 3. And I think if it had been 5 rounds, Kattar would have probably been able to beat him in those last couple of rounds. Like, sometimes I think people they cut to a point when they're really good for 15 minutes or less, and once it goes past that point, that's when I feel like things start to change in the opposite direction. The big question is obviously, can Colby, there you go, Mayhem ZZ22 or ZZ22 if you're in the US, can he outlast him? I think he can outlast him, absolutely. I think if this was a fight that went as long as it took to get the decision, Colby would end up. Sorry, if this fight had no time limit, to the point when Colby could just fight until there was a conclusion, then I think I think Colby benefits from that. The longer the fight is, the better. The question is in those first sort of 5-10 minutes, maybe not even 10 minutes, definitely the first 5 minutes. Chimaev can hit like a truck. He's very, very strong. But then, I talked about this in before his last fight. Like, the way he picked up the leech, the way he took down John Phillips in his first fight was a super efficient double leg, took him down into his guard, ran him to the fence. Then he comes out against Rhys McKee, which was 10 days later or something, picked him up, carried him over to the side of the octagon where his corner team were, and put him down. Then you skip to the Leach fight, and he picked him up, took him over to Dana while he's talking. Like, there was a clear escalation of performance, not necessarily performances in his what he did in the fight, but how he did it, the actual performance of it, and that's got an energy cost to it. Like, he can't be playing with Colby. If he picks Colby up and carries him across the cage in the first round, he's burning energy that he doesn't need to burn, that he might need in the 4th and 5th. But then that comes down to decision making. what are my initial thoughts on Costa Whittaker science now? You know, Whittaker for me is a far more technical fighter than Costa. Costa's dangerous and he's persistent and he's well conditioned, but I do feel like Whittaker's able to outthink him. I do feel like he's going to be Costa, Adesanya, Whittaker. I mean, that's probably how they are in the rankings, isn't it? I feel like Whittaker's slightly ahead of Costa, but not quite where Adesanya is when it comes to his, at least his striking skills. I also feel like Costa's, the way that he fights is not necessarily ideal for the way that Whittaker fights, because Whittaker's very good defensively. He's very good at kind of backing up and covering and level changing and tying people up. And for me, Costa expends more energy than he needs to. I think he could be a real power puncher, but he tends to get a bit too excited and to throw a lot. Now, one thing I would do if I was Costa is I would be using my body kicks, and I would use my presence to keep Whittaker up against the fence and keep nailing him with that body kick. Because that, you keep landing that on the arms, on the shoulders, it will just slow him down. And I do feel like Costa was never going to make welterweight, was he? Whittaker used to be a welterweight. He won the Ultimate Fighter as a welterweight. I feel like he's physiologically going to look smaller than Costa, but then that might work out better. Is this? I'm not sure whether this is 15 or 25 minutes. This one, again, it's similar to Chimaev against Colby. The longer it goes, the less physical strength and power come into play. The more it is about that ability to endure. And that's the reason why we have these 5-round fights, because sometimes when you get two fighters in a division who are, at the top of their game currently, or, near the top of their game. I mean, say what you want about Petr Yan, Sean O'Malley and the decision. Sean O'Malley was competitive enough to get 2 of the judges to score him a split decision. He was good enough to be able to make it a close fight. Even if it had gone split decision the opposite way to Yan, he was able to hang and to be consistent and competitive. Most likely to separate those two, we would need the additional 2 rounds. Now, sometimes in the lower rankings, lower down the card, especially if we can't have them all being 25 minutes, but a lot of fights can be concluded in 15 minutes or less. But when it comes to those high-level fights, when you've got 2 really, really strong competitors that are conditioned and prepared for one another, it gets to the end of the 15 minutes and it's like, where's the time gone? These 2 have still got loads in the gas tank and we've still not got a conclusion. I'm always interested when we get fighters that are that are so competitive and it's over 15 minutes, because it's almost like the pressure is on both of them to really put their foot on the gas and see if they can make a dent. Like, I talked about it before, Petr Yan at Sean O'Malley. And for me, Petr Yan lost the first round not because he wasn't pressuring or aggressive, because he wasn't doing anything on the end of it, really. I mean, he started to stitch a couple of body kicks on. We got the big takedown, but Yan was Sean was picking at him and working. And, I don't think about this sometimes when I'm watching the fights live. You score the first round, that's in the record book. You score the second round, that's in the record book. You score the third round. Then you look back and you go, okay, well, it's easy to forget that they were in portions. And when you get to the end of the 15 minutes, if you've not been making a note of things, you can just kind of go, you know what? This is my feeling. And this was a conversation we had on Aftermath the other day. I don't know what's right or wrong. What I do know is that a good percentage of people felt like Petr Yan won that fight on the immediate end of the live match. The general consensus was, hang on a minute, I feel like Petr Yan won that fight. Now, I've said, going back and watching it and scoring it, of course, now I know the result, but I'm going back and watching it, I felt Sean did enough to win the first and the last round. But the general essence of the fight that was the perspective that left me and the perspective that was left by Joe Rogan, again, casual watchers not judging, is Petr Yan won. And it was based on his aggression and his ability to take the shots that Sean O'Malley was throwing. I mean, I've just done a breakdown for Archive on Adesanya Pereira 1 and 2, their kickboxing matches, which will be, you'll see a clip of them, but they'll be available for the memberships when we launch them on Halloween. Similar situation, especially with their first fight. It was scored for Pereira. Adesanya was able to hit him with a lot of shots. He was able to tag him and make him miss, and his footwork was good, and he's moving laterally. But then when Pereira lands, you can see Adesanya's like bam, bam. Sometimes he's got his guard up, but it still looks very impactful. It's an interesting thing scoring for mixed martial arts, and I'll be honest. I know the judges that scored that are incredibly focused as judges. They are incredibly determined to make sure that they get the right outcome. It doesn't mean that at the end of the fight, the people viewing are not going to feel something different to the way that the judges scored it. But then that's partly, I think, because we're not all sitting there actually scoring it like it's our job, because it's not. Like, it's weird because kind of casually, I'm like, I watch the fights casually if I'm watching them live, because I don't know who wins. And I'm always kind of waiting for the finish. That's how it feels when I'm watching a fight. I'm always kind of, okay, I'm trying to figure out which pattern might lead to the finish, which I think, to be honest, I can't do both. I can't score and read the fight to see who's going to get the finish, if that makes sense. We should do a poll between who wins between Adesanya and Pereira. We'll on that afterwards, Jamie.
Yeah, I did the Whittaker Costa one.
Wicked. How's that one looking at the moment?
Whittaker's 88%, Costa's at 12%.
Okay, Costa really 12%. Yeah, I mean, I would expect that to be closer. To be honest, I would expect Costa to have be commanding at least 40% of the votes, just purely based on the fact that he looks like He-Man. Okay, we've got a question here from Justin Carter. Thoughts on Andrade's performance pre-low blow? I think the future's very, very bright for the kid. I really do. It was an unfortunate end to the fight, especially because that first knee to the body that he landed, you could see how it took the wind out of Lineker. We did a war room on it, didn't we, Jamie? We talked about that knee, and his timing on it is a thing of beauty. But with the excitement of landing it and the miscalculation of the follow up, he just gave the fight away. I feel really bad for him, especially because it's never ever going to be easy to. Adesanya Pereira's the poll started. It's never going to be easy to fight John Lineker. You're never going to have an easy fight against him, because he's always going to be able to really take a big shot, to be able to walk through the majority of what other people in that weight class can't, and to be able to deliver power shots on the end of him walking through like most people can't withstand. It's one of the reasons why he was the champ. It's one of the reasons why Andrade was going to be the underdog and was going to be backed up against the fence. But I thought he looked really slick, and I think there's a real bright future ahead of him. And one thing I will say as well, because I was having a bit of a back and forth on the One Championship Instagram, because they were talking about the stoppage, the Bibiano hook to the arm and hook to the head. I love Lineker. I think he's a very, very cool fighter to watch. He doesn't have the finesse. He's not picking that shot. He's reaching for the body is what he's reaching for. That is a fortunate thing to have happened. He caught the arm and then he flew on to the next one. But left hook comes after the right hook. He threw the right hook to the body and then he came up to the head. Anyway, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here. Hey, who's on Super Chat? Silver Blaze 20. I tell you what, talking to Silver, I was talking to my friend the other day who's starting to get loads. He's got really cool silver hair. Mine's starting to come through silver. What do you reckon? I'm feeling it. Okay. Are Adesanya's recent performances concerning regarding his third fight with Pereira? Boring or not, I feel like he struggles to enforce his will on his opponents, and don't know if it's because his opponent's strategies. I honestly think that it is down to the fact that he's fighting people that can muster more force and power than he can. Like he's almost always underpowered when he's taking somebody on. But in MMA, I think it's much less of a consequence for him when it comes to striking, because of the smaller gloves and his accuracy. His vocabulary when it comes to striking. I can't think of anybody else in the UFC that operates on that level. And a lot of fighters, they don't realize that level's there until they stand in front of it. Like sometimes, you see like Senchai touring around and he'll be doing seminars and stuff, and people want to spar with him, and he just toys with them. You know, he just plays with them. Like Adesanya's doing that on a very, very high level against someone that you know, I mean, is the top of their game. But he still levels and levels ahead of them. And I think Pereira's got that level in power, that ability to land one shot. In fact, just because I was just recording the archives on these fights. So that's the glove that they wore when they first fought. That's a 10-ounce Hayabusa. That's the glove that they were wearing. That's the glove that they will be wearing. So you've got 10 ounces and 4 ounces. And now, obviously, the 6 ounces of weight is not much. It's really not much. I mean, if you gave me a 10-ounce MMA glove, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you much difference in the weight. But what I will say is the size difference between the two makes the weapon that's flying at your head far smaller when you're fighting in MMA gloves. And that is as a benefit and a drawback to both. It is different, and you know, if you watch the Muay Thai fights in one championship where they're wearing the MMA gloves, you'll see the difference. You know, there's a lot more grabbing and hand fighting and pulling around onto elbows, but there's also less ability to defend by just tucking up and double guarding. Adesanya is not a double guard fighter anyway, and what you'll notice in the Pereira fights is when Adesanya's flying and peppering, Pereira, the majority of the time, he does use that lead shoulder a bit, but only when he's looking to counter. Most of the time, he's double guarding and he's covering, which means that the shots that Adesanya wasn't able to get through at all in kickboxing will now get through. Smaller gloves, less padding means that you can cut and you can scuff and you can, you know, do more damage quicker with the smaller gloves. I also think that Adesanya was having a really, really good time with him, especially in the first fight. I scored the fight for Adesanya. I thought he landed the better shots, just less impactful. I thought he made Pereira miss more, and I thought I just thought he generally looked slicker. And then you look the second fight, Pereira started off really aggressively, you know, pushed Adesanya back up against the ropes, but it wasn't long before Adesanya then started to take control again. And he stands and he offers his head, because he wants you to attack so he can start to counter. Then he'll switch to southpaw. Then he'll fire that left hand with the left kick on the end of it. He got a standing 8 count in the second round against Alex Pereira. But then Pereira travels through right hand to left hook and just cleans his clock with one shot. And, you know, we've seen him use that left hook a lot. He used it in LFA. I think it was a body kick to a left hook. Same thing with Strickland. You know, you saw him lean back with that counter left hook. He's an incredibly dangerous individual, and I think his power is a leveler in this matchup. But I do think that if they're playing tag, Adesanya's going to hit him far more times than he's going to get touched. It's just the consequence of Adesanya getting touched by Alex Pereira. Dangerous in kickboxing, even more dangerous in mixed martial arts. But then the thing that's flying at him is smaller, which means that those millimeters that he slips out the way are going to be far more valuable in these because it's a smaller thing to slip out the way of. Does that make sense? I think if Adesanya, like against Paulo Costa, Adesanya was backed up against the fence and he kept smacking him in the calf, and Costa, he just didn't have an answer for it. And then when Adesanya started to switch his stance and started to throw his straight left to the high kick, the one that cut him, then all of a sudden there's a whole other narrative going on. And you could see Adesanya, he would have one conversation, then he'd change the subject, then he'd change the subject again, and Paulo Costa's still trying to figure out what the first conversation was about. That's the difference. And I feel like Alex Pereira has gotten closer to that level, but I feel like he's been robbed of the time that Adesanya's had to learn that because he's been knocking people out. The benefit of knocking people out, of course, is that you fight less and you win more. The downside is that you're robbed of that time when you get to kind of craft your skills like Adesanya's had. I mean, you know, he's had a bunch of kickboxing matches, and the majority went the distance. It's allowed him to craft his skills without running through several opponents or sparring partners. Where are we at with the poll, Jamie? What people are saying at the moment?
52% have voted for Adesanya, and 48% have voted for Pereira.
52% Adesanya, 48 Pereira. Interesting. See, I kind of feel like, especially, especially when you get that soundbite from Joe Rogan. You know what I mean? Like he's got such a powerful, influential voice. Joe Rogan has. When he says something, people are like, "Oh yeah, oh no, Pereira's deadly," and there's no doubt that he is, absolutely. But we can't underestimate how slick Adesanya is, and this is his world. You know, this is his world. He was on a what was it, an 11-fight win streak before their first fight. And here's another interesting thing as well. So their first fight was the 2nd of April 2016. Adesanya was on an 11-fight win streak. Pereira was on a 1-fight win streak, having just lost to Jason Wilness, I think. Their second fight was 11 months later, 4th of March 2017. Pereira was 1-1 between those two fights. So in 11 months, he'd had 2 fights. Adesanya was 7-1. I mean, you know, yeah, I'm going to get into it this week anyway. I'm going to get into it this weekend because I'm going to be preparing my breakdown for BT Sport on this. Unfortunately, I can use their old kickboxing footage as well, so I'm going to be able to compare Pereira's striking in kickboxing compared to his MMA, and you'll see some real cool similarities. And you'll also see him knocking people out with. You'll also see him knock Adesanya out with those 10-ounce gloves, and you'll think to yourself, if he hits him with those 4s, and that sometimes is enough to sway people when you see that first knockout. But you've got to watch the whole fight. If you watch the whole fight, you think to yourself, well, Adesanya was kind of doing a number on him up to this point. He just takes Adesanya's shots so well. Jimmy Goodman. Jimmy, hello, Jimmy. Love the channel, man. Thank you. How much of a chance do you give Chandler versus Dustin Poirier? Just think Poirier will be too smart for him and catch him with a few shots. Yeah, I'm excited for that one as well. It's a really good matchup for both of them. I think Chandler is a difficult fighter for anyone to deal with because he's so athletic. You know, he stays low, so he's always got that that option to level change. Dustin Poirier can get very square if he's put against the back foot, so I could see him constantly defending the level change and then getting hit with shots at the same time. Like, I love that dip that Chandler does. We saw it against, was it Pitbull in Bellator, and he's like dipping, and he gives you the impression he's coming for that lead leg, and then he's straight over the top and stiffs you with it. It's Sydney Outlaw he caught with it as well. I could absolutely. I mean, honestly, I think if Chandler lands on the chin of anybody in the lightweight division, he's going to knock him out. I think his speed and his precision, and something that we see consistently with people that are good wrestlers, like Kamaru Usman against Masvidal, you see him commit to that shot because he knows he's got the level change underneath. Same thing with Makhachev against Gleison Tibau. He knows he's got the level change underneath, which means he can go full power into the cross that he's throwing. I expect Poirier to be a problem for him footwork-wise. I think that's going to be the biggest benefit to Poirier because he's very good at kind of moving laterally and bouncing, and he takes that deep breath and shrugs his shoulders and then comes back in with a flurry, and that knee comes center line as well. That's problems. I mean, you've got to think Dustin Poirier. Like if you put these guys in a pool, you've got Poirier, Gaethje, Chandler, Alvarez. Poirier sits at the top of that tree. That's why I'm going for him over Chandler. But they're all very similar fights. They're all veteran fighters that have a lot to offer. They can all wrestle. They can all box. They've all got submissions. It's a really fun fight, that one. I'm going to do a breakdown on it, but I'm going to really get into the research on that one because I thoroughly enjoy watching them both fight.
A couple of donations.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, there's thoughts on from Dylan G.
Dylan G.
Thoughts on Ismagulov versus Tsarukyan.
Thoughts on Ismagulov against Tsarukyan. I expect Tsarukyan to wrestle, and I expect him to wrestle hard. And I think that Ismagulov might. I mean, he's a good striker, Ismagulov, and he predominantly chooses to strike, if I remember right. So I expect him to be able to at least stuff the first couple of takedowns from Tsarukyan, but I feel like if Tsarukyan's not discouraged by those first couple of takedowns being defended and he's persistent, he would be safer to be on Ismagulov's back and trying to wrestle him up against the fence. Like I think Tsarukyan, as far as grappling, I mean, he was only just slightly behind Makhachev when they fought off. It was a really impressive back and forth that was. I've watched it a couple of times recently. I always see something new. I always learn something new. His transitions were incredible. I think that he's improved enough to this point to be able to have confidence that, I mean, you've got to think, the guy that he made his UFC debut against and gave him a really good performance against, he's now the champion. I think that automatically levels up his confidence. And I think he's one to watch. Ismagulov is dangerous, of course. He's a well-rounded fighter, very, very dangerous. But I don't know as I see that. I don't know as I see that world-class level in his future. Like Tsarukyan, even if he loses this fight, I feel like he's going to continue to progress to become a much more elite fighter. I mean, we'll see. Well, let me have a. Arman Tsarukyan. Yeah, I mean, his wrestling is just so solid that you take a fighter like Tsarukyan and you put him at ATT and he's gonna grow. And you put him at where is it? Tiger Muay Thai now. He was at ATT for a while, wasn't he? Sure, he was. Yeah, I mean, I expect him to be able to get this fight to the floor, or at least slow it down enough to win a decision. Ismagulov's dangerous, but I don't know. I have high expectations for Tsarukyan. Maybe that's swaying me. Okay, what are the questions we got, Jamie? You say we had another one?
There's been another donation since, but
Jake Carroll.
There was one just before.
Which one did I miss? I don't want to miss any of you guys.
Sky.
Guy in the Sky. That's a great name.
Is it time Sean O'Malley upgrades coaches?
Is it time Sean O'Malley upgrades coaches? I don't know, to be honest, because it's Tim Welsh, isn't it? His coach. I know he does his work. I know he does his homework. And sometimes like the benefit that Sean O'Malley has as an MMA fighter is that he doesn't have all that previous martial arts junk in the back of his head. Like, you got to think, when I started doing mixed martial arts, I had hours and hours of horse stance and long stance and ap chagi and yop chagi and, sulim tau, and like there's a lot of junk in my head that I don't need. It took up a lot of hard drive space, and I had to work against a lot of things when I was doing mixed martial arts, because there were things that I would normally do in a competition or in sparring that would immediately overextend me in mixed martial arts in ways that I wasn't prepared to deal with. Sean O'Malley started with mixed martial arts, so he's been able to build his game around specifically what the sport requires. And there are very few fighters in the UFC that have one coach that gives them everything, right? You're always going to have to diversify, but when you diversify, and you're also tapping into skill sets that might be dated, their thinking might be dated, their approach might be dated. What I like about Tim Welsh is that he is developing as a coach in the mixed martial arts time. And I think that keeps his mind open, and I think that there's a lot of sharing of opinions. I don't think it's a coach and a fighter situation. I think it's a team, and I think they have a good working relationship where they're able to take what's happening on a weekly basis in mixed martial arts and absorb it into their skill sets. As long as you watch them with the right eyes, you can learn so much without going to world-class gyms and training under world-class coaches. And, what is a world-class coach? It's someone that's stuck at it for long enough until they've found someone that they've been able to make into a champion. Sometimes it's about the fighter. Sometimes it's about the coach. Often it's about the two of them coming together. So I can't count Tim Welsh out, not at all. And, we also don't know what would have happened if it was over 25 minutes as well. Like, I'm, of course, leaning in the direction that Petr Yan would have probably been able to take over. But Sean O'Malley might have been able to also find a home for one of those crosses. I just don't know. And, Petr Yan was also cut, wasn't he? He got cut in the clinch with a knee. So you've got to think that that would have played into the scorecards and into maybe even in the doctors if another 10 minutes was added into the fight. Okay, Jake Carroll, thank you for the donation, my friend. What do you make of O'Malley performing better than Sandhagen against Yan? I used to think Sandhagen was a lot trickier, higher fight IQ version of O'Malley. Do you still think Sandhagen can win the title? Yeah, I absolutely do. I really do. Sandhagen for me is a little bit like Charles Oliveira, and he's not quite at the same level where Charles was when he won the belt yet. He's very close, and we've seen some solid performances out of him. But at the same time, you know, there are things that he's taken from his recent fights that are going to make him better in the long run. I mean, where is he? He's had 19 fights. You got to think Charles Oliveira, 41 fights going into his last one. There's a long way to go for Corey Sandhagen. He's only 30 years old, 15 wins, 4 losses. Like I expect him to. I mean, his career is just so young, and he's already fought Dillashaw and he's already fought Petr Yan. He stopped Song Yadong. Yeah, I've got to address that. I said that he was fighting Song Yadong next. I was looking at some old notes on I won't say the website. I'll throw them under the bus because someone was not updating. But what happened? I was reflecting on this the other day, and I was thinking to myself, how could I have possibly forgot that nasty cut? And it was because everything before UFC 280 felt like it was 6 months ago. And I thought I read it and I thought to myself, oh, there must be a rematching. Oh, okay, fair. I didn't. My fault. My bad. Apologies. I got so many people pulling me up in the comments. I'll have to start one of those correction shows like Seth Meyers has got. Okay, week of corrections. I am still very much keeping my eye on Corey Sandhagen. And again, no discredit in any way to Sean O'Malley, but I think 5 rounds would be a different story. I think 5 rounds would be a very different story against a lot of these guys. Against Petr Yan, 5 rounds is a different thing entirely. Yan and Corey was 5 rounds, wasn't it? Like, you know, yeah. Like I was saying a little bit earlier, like when you look at the top of the division, when you look at the rankings, to me, those top 5 or 6 fighters should be competitive over 5 rounds most of the time. Like if they're not, it's because one of them has leveled up and they've managed to find their way through. But the well-roundedness and the conditioning of all these fighters should be able to really make a lot of these fights competitive. And I wonder if Sean O'Malley, at this point in his career, I wonder if Sean O'Malley's competitiveness with the top 5 falls away a little bit when he starts fighting over 5 rounds. I will say I think it's mad that he's jumped up to the top of the division. What is he, ranked number 1 at the moment? Where is he? Oh, these not been updated yet. I don't updated the rankings yet. Oh, no, there we go. Here we go. Moved up 10 places. Like, what is this? A ranking on pay-per-view numbers? I don't understand that. That makes no sense to me. Imagine if you're, I mean, you can just imagine what Dominic Cruz is saying right now. I would love to know what Dominic Cruz, I would like to have been sitting in front of this computer screen with Dominic Cruz looking over my shoulder while I refreshed it to watch Sean O'Malley go. That's some number 1 bullshit. And Marlon Vera he's walking to Vegas right now as we speak, wearing out his second pair of shoes on that long road from California. He's looking for Sean O'Malley for a fight. I'm telling you, it's just such a weird thing to see such a massive jump, and especially I don't know if rankings can change that much, especially right at the top of the division, unless it's a 5-round fight. I mean, a lot of these guys, you know, the Petr Yans and the Corey Sandhagens, the Dillashaws, the Dominic Cruz, they're 5-round fighters. I don't know if Sean O'Malley would be in that position if he'd have fought a couple of those guys over 5 rounds. That's my honest truth about that. We've got some more questions, haven't we? You know, I just to answer your question quick, Jake, I hope I did, but in case I didn't, I think if Sandhagen fought O'Malley now over 5 rounds, Sandhagen wins. I'm not counting Sean O'Malley out, his ability to get to that stage, but right now, over 5 rounds, I feel like Sean O'Malley wouldn't be able to beat a couple of the guys underneath him at least. I think he would struggle with Sandhagen. I think he would struggle with Marlon Vera. I think he would struggle with Petr Yan over 5 rounds. Like, that was like, we're arguing about a split decision over 3 rounds. You add another 10 minutes onto the end of that, and I feel like Petr Yan, that's where he shifts into 4th gear. and that's when he starts to get really lethal. My question going into that fight was always about the fact that it was 15 minutes, and I felt like O'Malley was going to be able to, you know, get the win. Okay, we had any more questions, Jamie?
Yeah.
What we got here?
Cuba Homola.
Oh, hang on a minute. Let me see if I can find it.
It's just below Jake's.
Where's Jake's?
The big yellow one. Yeah, go. Keep going.
Oh.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. Cuba. Till coming back is opening as a slight underdog. Your thoughts on his future? Did he peak, or is there more of him? There's absolutely more of him. The thing you've got to remember with Darren Till, and it's easy to forget this because of his confidence and his character. He's still young. He's still really early in his career. You know, what is he, born in 92? Like, he's still young in his career. We could potentially see a whole new version of Darren Till when he comes back. You know, training with Chimaev, you got to think that's going to be horrendous. And Duplessis, who is his next opponent, I think he's ideal for him to really show what he's capable of. I mean, Duplessis is dangerous because he's got heavy hands, and you know, if Till allows him to get too close, then he's definitely going to be a handful. But I feel like Till's able to manage range so well, and the expectations were so high on him when he first came into the UFC. Like, he immediately leapfrogged Leon Edwards into a UFC title shot, into a UFC main event, and that is a clear sign of what their expectations were of him. You know, he's going to regroup. You know, he's going to regroup as long as he's training settled. That's the only thing I think with Darren Till. He needs some consistency in his life, and I think that's what training at Cowbomb was always for him. He had that consistent. Colin Herentech knows shit. This is what you do. You get ready. You train hard, and I think it got him in a real warlike state of mind. I mean, of course, I don't know where he's at right now and what he's doing, but I hope when he steps into training camp for the Duplessis fight, when is that? December 10. So he should be starting. He should be starting soon if he's not already. I think as long as his training is consistent, and I think as long as he puts in his work with his conditioning, so he's not hesitant to put his foot on the gas, I think he comes through this one, and I think he can continue to progress towards a title shot. I can't discount Darren Till in any way, because I know the skills that he's got, and there's the guys above him like Hermansson, Strickland, Costa, Brunson, Vittori, you know, even Cannonier. They're all fights that I would expect Darren Till to win in the next couple of years if he gets matched up against them. The difficult ones, of course, is going to be the Adesanyas and the Whittakers, and even potentially Pereira because of his style. And the one other guy I'm looking at, who's just below Darren Till, is Andre Muniz. I think he's the dark horse in this division. But Duplessis got a good opportunity to jump up here. He's at number 13 right now. Darren Till's at number 9. This is a big opportunity for him as well, which means he's going to come in all guns blazing and ready to get into the top 10. I can't count Darren Till out though. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Sometimes you just watch someone move, even in public, even not in a fight scenario. Sometimes you just watch him move around a room and you go, okay, he's got that presence, and he definitely does. He definitely does have that presence. Yeah, and he's got a head like a gorilla as well, hasn't he? Let's be honest. Matthew Byrne, does Belal deserve a title shot? 4 top 10 wins. I mean, I was endlessly impressed with him in his last fight. Of course, I picked Sean Brady. I thought Brady was going to be able to win 2 of the 3 rounds, but I also wasn't expecting Belal Muhammad to be that aggressive. I think the confidence that he's got training with Khabib, I think he's realised his strength. His strength is to bully, is to be persistent and in people's faces and throwing more than they're throwing, and throwing with more intensity than they're throwing. Because he's a quick thinker. I mean, much like Beneil Dariush, because he's a quick thinker, he's able to like flow through the fight and keep himself relatively safe. And his pressure is what broke Sean Brady. That, you know, the moment he stuffed that first takedown against Sean Brady, you could tell Sean Brady's his confidence had taken a big hit. I mean, you look where Belal Muhammad is right now. So he's at number 4. He's got Chimaev, Covington, and Usman above him, as well as, of course, Leon. It's a difficult situation to be in because he might find himself looking back down the rankings. You know, I mean, he's at number 1. He's at number 4 at the moment. He's moved up 1 place to be above Gilbert Burns. But he's not going to get a fight against any of those guys at the top. Kamaru Usman's not going to take a chance fighting someone like Belal Muhammad. Colby Covington and Chimaev are matched up. And, you know, I mean, he's done the right thing by calling out Leon, hasn't he? Because they had that no contest with the eye poke. I just don't know as he's got the market value right now to step straight in for a title shot. And unless Usman isn't going to rematch Leon immediately, and then there's a bit of time when they can put somebody in there. But honestly, I feel like if Masvidal makes enough noise, he could usurp all of them. You know, like Masvidal can talk himself into most of these fights, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see that fight. It wouldn't surprise me if it's the main event of UFC London in March, Leon against Masvidal, the rematch, the official match. You know. Weird things happen when people get title shots, when people get titles, and a little bit of a lag in the division if there's not going to be an immediate rematch. You know, I mean, you got to think like Bisping defended his belt against Dan Henderson. Like, prior beef is a real value, and the fact that Masvidal's already hit him with 3-piece and a soda might have automatically qualified him for a title shot, as crazy as that sounds. But then, you know, Sean O'Malley's just jumped up 10 places, so, you know, who knows what's happening. Sometimes they just treat these rankings like an egg timer and just keep flipping upside down, I think. Okay, where are we? My goodness, we've got lots of people watching. Thank you for your question, Matthew. Yes, I do believe he deserves a title shot, just like Beneil Dariush deserves a title shot. Whether he'll get one of those or not, I don't know, though. That's actually something that I was going to chat about, because Javier Mendez has mentioned that Islam should be fighting Dariush next as opposed to Volk. And, of course, we all want to see the Volk fight. It would be a very, very interesting fight. Very fast-paced, very aggressive, great striking, great wrestling. I mean, you know, I'm excited just thinking about it. But Dariush should probably get a title shot, right? Have we got a poll going right now? How long we got left on it, Jamie?
I can end it whenever.
Okay, where are we at right now?
So it's
53% for Ade.
53% for Adesanya.
Yeah.
47 for Pereira.
That's cool.
And that's 689 votes.
Okay, nice. So nearly 700 votes and 53% of you think that Adesanya's going to take it. That's very interesting. That's a lot closer than I thought. I was expecting people to be leaning slightly more towards Pereira. Interesting. Yeah. Let's have that as a poll, because I'm interested to see what people think. Dariush or Volk. Who should get the next title shot at 155? Of course, it was agreed in the octagon, and I mean, I think Volk was doing shoeies on the way up to the octagon one. He had a proper little tipsy swagger on him. I would love to see that fight, and I kind of feel like the match was made the way that it all played out. But you know, things do keep shifting. I saw also that Dariush is preparing for a title shot, so he's going to keep pushing his way forward, and I think that's the smart thing to do. I think Belal needs to do the same thing. Be mouthy, you know, call people out, ask for what you want, demand it, you know, make some noise. Dariush against Makhachev. I think Dariush is a safer opponent for Makhachev, if I'm honest. I think he plays into the game of Makhachev a lot more than Volk does. Volk's like he just never stops moving, does he? He's constantly switching his stance, drifting out of one stance and into the next, leaping back in to pepper people with shots. Like, it's very rare that you see someone fry Aldo's brain, and Aldo just couldn't keep up with the erratic movement of Volk. It was like, he's gone. I think that would be really problematic for Makhachev, unless he can get his hands on him, and then we'll see what Volk looks like as a 155er, because he's most likely going to look like a powerhouse. I think Dariush is a more comfortable fight for Makhachev. You know, not saying he's not a challenge, because of course he is, but he doesn't have that erratic movement or the work rate that Volk does. And Volk's proven over 5 rounds. And I also think to myself, because you've got to remember, yeah, Volk's fighting at 145, and you could say, oh, yeah, but what's he going to look like at 155? And most likely he's 155 before he starts his weight cut. So what you're asking me is what would he look like fully hydrated without having to make 145? And I think he'd probably look pretty scary. I think his pace would be the same. I think his work rate would be the same, but I think he would physically be more imposing. I think he'd be more powerful, and I think he'd be more damaging with his shots. Yeah. Matthew Byrne. Do you think Kamaru will be timid after getting KO'd? How do you feel going into... how do you go... okay, good question. Sometimes I have to read these first. So... do you think Kamaru will be timid after getting KO'd? How do you feel going into the Rumble fight after getting KO'd? Did it change your mindset? It really did. Yeah, it really did. Because, I mean, I'd been... I got dropped twice in a Thai boxing match. I don't know. It was just after I'd fought in Fight Fest. So it was before my UFC career. And I got caught with a big left hook, put down on one knee, back up, put down a bit later in that fight. I always felt like I could take a big shot, and I know it wasn't the right thing to do. Unfortunately, I really didn't get hit too much. I was quite fortunate. I mean, I've only ever had 5 stitches in my entire career, which, when I talk to some of these other fighters, it's kind of crazy. I was very fortunate to be able to get my head out of the way of most of the big shots coming in my direction. But when Condit caught me with that shot, for I don't know, probably a week afterwards, I had this thought to myself that was. It's almost like, well, now that's it. Now your chin's gone. Now you just can't take a shot. Now every shot that hits you on the chin is going to put you out. And of course, that's not the case. There are a lot of circumstances that have to align for a knockout to happen. And the best thing for me to do was to look at that knockout over and over again and to unpick it and to figure out all the elements about it that led to the outcome. And this is always what concerns me when I see. Like, remember when Ronda was coming back to fight Holly Holm, and the UFC put that really good advert out, where you kind of saw the fight from Ronda's perspective, where she got hit and is like dazed, and she's waking up, and you can see Holly Holm walking away celebrating, and like it was a big problem. It was a big problem. The UFC had to take it down. We couldn't talk about it, couldn't hear about it. It was not a thing. That to me immediately shows a psychological weakness, because that's an inability to face something. Right? Like, I mean, literally, I've watched my knockout against Condit. I must have watched it over 1,000 times, because first of all, I want to learn from it. If I don't watch it back, I'm not going to learn that mistake. So I'm going to get caught with it again. And I mean, I did get caught with it again. Fortunately, I wasn't quite as vulnerable the next time around. But sometimes the lessons have to get learned, and if you ignore a big lesson like that, then it's always going to be there to bite you in the ass. And the thing is with that, we've seen so many people get caught with that same shot. It's a clear pattern that works very, very well. Someone throws their rear hand and they follow it with the rear head kick. We saw Leon do it. We saw TJ Dillashaw do it against Renan Barao. Rakic was quite similar. Obviously, he stepped forward with the lead kick against Jimmy Manoa. But the point is, I'm facing you right now. You're my opponent. If we're the same stance and you throw your cross at me, I might reach for that cross here to make sure that it falls short, it falls towards this shoulder, and that I'm out the way of it, right? The downside to that, of course, is that as my hand moves across the other side of my chin, my head's moving in this direction and my chin's unguarded. It's as simple as that. It's no more complicated than that. But in the chaos of a 5-round fight, and the fact that Leon had started well, but then Kamaru had come back into the fight and was winning on the scorecards, but they were both a bit tired. Kamaru felt like he was right close to the end of the fight and he was going to defend his belt once more, and he just didn't see that pattern coming. And it was a great rallying cry from the corner team of Leon Edwards as well. They are a fantastic team. V and I have been over there a couple of times, and we've watched them training. We've hung out with the coaches. They have got a bunch of very, very skilled bright and dedicated individuals over there. I expect a lot more to come from Leon's gym, and that's one of the reasons why I think Arnold Allen is going to be in a really good position this weekend, because he's been driving over to train with Leon and the team, and he's got lots of good bodies over there that could definitely, well, they were putting pressure on him like Calvin Kattar would. So I think I expect big things from Arnold as well as the other guys in that gym. I don't know if Usman's going to be that affected by it. It might make him a bit more timid, because there was a point in his career earlier where he was fairly timid as a striker. You could tell he wasn't particularly comfortable throwing punches, and he certainly wasn't comfortable receiving them. And one of the reasons why I say that, I feel like I pulled a muscle in my ribs here. If you watch him fight Gilbert Burns, he hits Gilbert Burns with a shot, and you see Gilbert Burns immediately hurt. Now, in that moment, you can see how familiar that moment is for the fighter that's landed the knockout shot by how they react. Like if you watch someone like a Mark Hunt, or someone that's got heavy hands that's used to knocking people out. John Lineker, we were talking about him earlier. Same thing. He'll knock somebody out. He'll see them hit the deck, and he doesn't have that, oh my God, I've scored a knockout. Oh, shit. And you see that from so many fighters, especially fighters that have come from a martial art other than striking. I still get it. You saw me in the Dwayne Ludwig one. I pumped the jab. I came around the side, hit him with the left hook, and immediately my arms went up. My arms went up, but then what you'll see is I recover and I go to the finish. The reason why I had that spike in excitement obviously was because I was on a 4-fight losing streak, and that was the moment that I'd been dreaming would happen, and it was the technique that I'd wanted to do it with as well. So, there was a lot of reasons why I got that celebration out, but it took over me for a moment before I was able to switch back in and go, throw the punch didn't hit, a couple of elbows, finished the job. When you see Usman land a shot against Gilbert Burns, you see that excitement, because all of a sudden his arms start to go wide, and his eyes go wide, and he's swinging, and he's, I've got to knock him out, because it's like the moments are getting away from him the longer he stays on his feet. After we saw the Gilbert Burns fight, and he's now got that confidence that he's got that clean jab that can take somebody off their feet, then we start to see that development in his game and that development in his confidence. And I do think that it's like he's taken, how many steps forward? Like 2-3 steps forward, and then he's been knocked back a little bit. But I don't think he's going to take a massive psychological hit from it. It's one of those things that happens. And at the top level, when you're fighting these guys, when you're fighting someone like Leon, he had to expect that at some point. He might get caught with a big shot. I just think he expected to be able to weather it and get through it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's going to affect him too much. I think we might see him wrestle more. I think we might see him set up his takedowns with his hands a bit more. But he's training with Trevor Whitman. If they're smart, they will watch that and they will dissect it. Trevor Whitman will explain exactly what happened to him, and hopefully Usman will be able to take it and make peace with it, put it to bed. There's loads of different ways of doing that. I used to watch Vanderlei Silva highlight reels on my phone. On my old iPod, in fact, Jamie. How long ago was that? Colour iPod. I've got 2 highlight reels on it. I got Vanderlei Silva and I got Ernesto Hoost. Am I feeling animalistic or am I feeling slick? It's one or the other. I'm either here or I'm doing the dance after I've knocked him out. It's one of the two. Okay, Ryan Howe. Who can take Islam out currently, and what do you think his weaknesses are? Is it even competitive in that division anymore? Yeah, I absolutely think it is competitive in this division. And I honestly think that depending on what's going on with Charles Oliveira's weight, I still feel like he could be a real problem for Makhachev. I'm not so sure his weight cut was great out in Abu Dhabi. I'm not so sure it was. I mean, we saw him sweating out from Tuesday. That makes no sense to me. You don't want to be dehydrating from Tuesday unless you've got loads to lose and you're really concerned that you're not going to make it. And even if that's the case, there are better ways of doing it than sweating out, because you're going to have to rehydrate anyway. So then all you're doing is you're just putting your body through a cycle of sweat, hydrate, and it's, it would be better just doing long workouts and burning it that way, and then controlling his calories. I can't count Charles Oliveira out getting his belt back, of course. And if I look down the rest of the division, if it's not Charles Oliveira, I don't feel like it's going to be Beneil Dariush. I'm sorry, Beneil. I feel like you can have a couple of really good fights against the likes of Porier and Gaethje and Chandler and maybe get a title shot. But ultimately, I feel like he becomes a veteran in that pool, replacing a Gaethje or a Chandler or a Porier when they retire. Competitive, but not a world champion. But prove me wrong, Beneil, if you're listening, which I'm sure you're not. I think Charles Oliveira is the biggest problem for Makhachev. I could see them fighting 2 more times, and I could see Charles Oliveira getting his belt back and then Makhachev taking it back off him. I can see Charles Oliveira having a couple of fights further down the division and making it look really easy. I would even watch Charles Oliveira against Beneil Dariush, and I would put my money on Oliveira to win that fight. And I'd be interested to know what you guys think as well about that, actually. But honestly, if Islam is able to beat Charles Oliveira a second time, Poirier, Gaethje, Dariush, Chandler, RDA, I think we're waiting until we get a surge from the bottom of the division. Like even down 13 and 14, you've got McGregor and Tony Ferguson. It seems like time's gone by with those 2 guys down there. But then if I look at the other names in the division, I mean, Jalen Turner is a problem for anybody, just purely based on his overall game and his physical attributes. He's definitely not ready for the guys up near the top of the division, but I'm keeping my eye on him. Arman Tsarukyan, Mateusz Gamrot, even though he's coming off that loss to Dariush, Hafil Fiziv. And there's a couple of guys that have not fought for a bit. Gregor Gillespie, he should be up there somewhere as well. That's the next surge in the lightweight division, and I do feel like Islam Makhachev will most likely be the champion, and he'll be fighting the contenders as they're coming up. But then you throw Volk into the mix, and then who knows what's going to happen. Like if Volk wins the belt, then what does he do? Stay and defend it at lightweight, or go back down to featherweight and defend it, or does he vacate one, or does he try and hold both? I don't know. It really muddies the waters. And this is something else that I was gonna get onto, actually. I did make a note of it. Here we go. So I hope that answers your question, Ryan. Volk getting a title shot. So how does that come about? Of course he's the champion in the weight class below, but he is also the number 1 pound for pound. So now I'm thinking to myself, well, if you're able to get to the top of the pound-for-pound rankings, which Volk is right now, Volkanovski, Adesanya, Makhachev, Kamaru Usman still above Leon Edwards. Anyway, I think if you're number 1 at the top of the pound-for-pound division, you should be able to trade that in for an immediate title shot in any of the weight classes above or below you. I mean, that's what makes the most sense for Volkanovski getting a title shot, is the fact that he is the pound-for-pound champ. It just really slows the division down if he comes in and wins. Unless he's planning on staying in the division and vacating his belt. He could quite easily leave the featherweight division behind for a bit and give it some breathing room. The likes of Arnold Allen coming through, Giga Chikadze, Movsar Evloev, Bryce Mitchell. These again, we're waiting for that surge from the bottom of the division at the moment. It wouldn't be a bad thing for Volkanovski to move up to lightweight and give that a bit of breathing room. And then you might also get Volkanovski against the likes of, Poirier. And imagine Volkanovski against Gaethje or Chandler. They're good fights. I don't mind. It would be difficult if he's holding down 2 divisions. That would be problematic. It'd be frustrating, especially if you're Beneil Dariush. Okay, Ethan Hall. Okay, it's annoying to me when people vote against Colby due to their personal feelings for Colby. Do you find it difficult to be objective of certain fights? Now, of course, I would like to say no. I like to give everybody a fair shout. I think instinctively we all have our biases, though. I think we all do. I think we always watch a fight with a preconceived idea of what's going to play out, and of kind of who we want to win. Like, use the Sean O'Malley Petr Yan fight for example. I expected I talked about it in the War Room. I expected Sean O'Malley, if he played his cards right, to be able to kind of get to a decision and steal it away from Petr Yan based on his work rate, based on him being able to throw more and land more, even if he wasn't as bullying with his shots or as controlling with the space. But then as I'm watching it, I'm watching Petr Yan and I'm thinking, God, I just feel like he's going to get to him at some point. And I do feel like there is a natural bias there with me seeing him as the more aggressive of the two fighters. Like, whenever I see someone controlling the center and pushing their opponent around, immediately I start to kind of lean into that a little bit because I have a bias towards aggressive fighters. I do, no doubt. When it comes to voting with these things, though, and I do agree with you, because ultimately what I'm trying to figure out with these polls is who you think's going to win, not who do you like the most. Like, Colby is naturally aggravatory for a lot of people. He's public about his politics, he's public about his opinions, he's very in character all the time. And I think some people do find that exhausting. And then as a result, when they're watching him fight, they want to see him lose because of it. It's the reason Mayweather was able to command such big pay-per-view numbers. Not because everyone loved him and couldn't wait to hear what he said next, because people wanted to see him get chinned. And I agree with you, Ethan. I do think a lot of people do have biases when they're picking towards. I'll be honest with you. When I'm doing my breakdowns, it gets to the point, especially if it's like a BT breakdown. They used to take me 3 days. They tend to take me 5 days now. I like to really get inside the fight, and it gets to the point when I see both of them as competitors that are trying their best to reach the same goal. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, how do you put your bias to one side? How does anybody do it? I try and respect everybody as a martial artist, and I feel like if you're being objective about your opinion, then you can always look on that part of, you can always recognize that people are sacrificing a lot and working hard, regardless of what you think of Colby Covington. He has worked his ass off to be in the position that he's in, and there's also, I wouldn't do what he's done because I wouldn't want people to think that I was that person. He has to make peace with that as well. I feel like that's quite hard work, making peace with the fact that people aren't going to like you even though they don't know you. I mean, that's the nature of having some kind of celebrity. Like, people immediately form opinions, and I don't think Colby's like that. Like, we've got that bit of footage. Was it like a fan expo or something, a fan meet and greet? Colby versus Lawler, and it was a little clip where he just kind of stepped out of character for a minute, right? And I've seen a clip of Conor doing the same thing on a Cage Warriors promo. And it was because he just won the second belt, and I'd won 2 belts in Cage Warriors, and like they kind of pitched the idea of me fighting him to him, and like straight away he's like, if Dan Hardy wants a tilt, wants a scrap, we'll have a scrap. But then straight away, like, his character dropped and he stepped out of it, and he was very respectful. And people can put the mask on and off, but I do feel like it's like the Photoshop jaw fracture thing. Like, for me, that was a story that was lent into by Colby Covington after the fight to cause more conversation about his fight with Kamaru Usman. He actually blamed the Photoshop on Kamaru Usman, because he was trying to claim he'd done more damage. It's a weird world. There's a lot of misinformation. I think Colby Covington spins people in circles, to be honest. I think whenever you put a poll up of whether you think Colby's going to win or not, it's always going to be skewed by people's opinions. For the most part, I think he's rather entertaining. And I do feel kind of sorry for him having to have played the game that he's played to get the opportunity that he's got. But he read the room, didn't he? He read the room. Okay, Michael Stradford. Really enjoying your content and your perspective. Thank you, mate. Thank you. Can you envisage any scenario where Whittaker can beat Izzy? He's a great competitor, but it seems like Izzy's length and is the thing that he can't get around. I mean, it does very much seem like that is the main issue that he's having, is the speed and reach of Izzy. But then, you look at the developments that we're seeing in Whittaker's game, and if I've had a title shot against Izzy and I got stopped like he did, and I've taken some time out. And then the thing that got me back into training for competition was putting my gi on and doing jiu-jitsu. Like, that clearly shows you that he wasn't ready to step back in and deal with his striking and I say deal with it. He's got great striking. It was easier for him to step onto the jiu-jitsu mats and do something that was disconnected from that last performance. As soon as he goes back in there and starts hitting pads or sparring again, now he's having to process the getting out struck by Izzy. Stepping back onto the mats and doing jiu-jitsu not only will then develop that part of his game, but it also gave him that motivation to get back into training. I think the best way for him to go about fighting Izzy again is just to be a hardcore wrestler. Go out to Dagestan with Belal Muhammad and go and train with Khabib. That's what I would like to see from Rob Whittaker, because I feel like he's got the conditioning for it. He's definitely got the level change and the speed for it. We've seen the development in his wrestling. He took Kelvin Gastelum down a bunch of times, didn't he? And then, you go back to Izzy against Jan Blachowicz, and of course Whittaker and Blachowicz are different size fighters, but if you level change at the right time, your momentum and drive can put somebody on the floor. I think if Whittaker's smart and he doesn't get too flustered in the striking range, then he can give Izzy the impression that he's not going to level change, and then he can. Like, Jan was very, very smart about the way that he did it. He kind of stood his ground a little bit and checked all his low kicks and chased Izzy down, didn't let him get away with anything. But then in the later rounds, then he started to add his level changes in. At the point when Izzy was not really ready to deal with it, because he'd already kind of switched that part of his brain off. If I'm Rob Whittaker, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. I'm moving and I'm drawing Izzy in. I'm not running onto his shots like he did the first time they fought. Because, that was impatience. That was annoyance and impatience, it looked like to me in his game. It was, you got to think, he was the champ. He'd had some hellish battles with Yoel Romero. And everyone was talking about Adesanya, this is the guy. And Whittaker, all of a sudden, he's kind of like, he's second best in people's opinions because of Israel Adesanya and the hype around him. And he came into that fight angry, as if he was trying to prove a point, I think. He was swinging for Izzy in ways that he wouldn't have normally done. He didn't fight with the same kind of composure that I've seen him in before or after. And I think that's the way for him to do it, is to be a mixed martial artist and maintain that composure. And the challenge is to do that in the striking range long enough so he can surprise Izzy with his takedowns. Who knows? Whittaker's a very, very talented individual. Very skilled fighter all around. He's definitely got the skills to beat Izzy, but the belief in himself is, I think, going to be the main hurdle that he can get over. And I think having that safety net, knowing that he can level change and put him on the floor, or at least threaten to put him on the floor, will keep his confidence in the fight. Okay. What have I got else to talk about? Any more questions I've missed, Jamie? What do people think about Yan leaving the UFC? Petr Yan. I think I would like to see Petr Yan sit down and watch that fight with some judges and score it. I understand why he feels like that. I understand why he feels like he won the fight, especially because he was the one that was taking the shots and not really getting fazed by them, and the one that was landing shots and obviously feeling like he was doing some damage. I wonder, though, especially after the Aljamain Sterling knee to the head, I wonder how much of an understanding Petr Yan has on the sport of mixed martial arts. I think he's good at fighting, and I think he loves fighting, and I think he's a well-rounded fighter. But I don't think he looks at mixed martial arts as a sport that he needs to understand. I think he shows up and he fights, and yeah, yeah. I think this could be a good learning experience for him. Sometimes when people have had a close split decision loss, they get frustrated and they level up their game. Yeah, we'll see. I hope he doesn't leave. I like him in this mix. I think he's a problem for anybody, especially over 5 rounds. Yeah. Honestly, I think there's enough controversy around for him. Even regardless of what you think about the decision, I think there's enough controversy around it for him to talk his way into a rematch. He seems, whether it's him doing the talking or not, whoever's controlling his Twitter and stuff has got a very sharp wit, and I think he could really aggravate Sean O'Malley. And you would have to be pushing for 5 rounds in a rematch. Only stunting. Early prediction on how Colby versus Khamzat goes. At this moment, I'm leaning slightly towards Colby. I feel like his pressure and his pace might be able to get to Chimaev and wear him down. He's going to have to wrestle hard and accept failing takedowns and maybe even getting taken down himself, but then refusing to be held down. And, you've got to remember, like, Usman didn't waste any energy the first time around taking Covington down. Didn't waste any energy. Not because he couldn't have done it if he'd already tried, probably because he would have had to really try. And that really try means expending loads of gas that you're probably going to need in the 4th and 5th. In the second fight, what did he take Colby down? 3 times, I think it was. But each time it was a level change under Colby attacking, perfectly timed, put him down, and then disengaged and was back to his feet. That to me shows that Usman's got respect for Covington's wrestling and his ability to keep wrestling. Difficult to hold down, difficult to control. Chimaev might have absolute nightmares holding Covington down. He might have to waste a lot of energy holding him down, which is definitely finite for Chimaev. He took a couple of big shots against Gilbert Burns. They clashed heads as well. He went down on a knee. This has got to be over 5 rounds, and I can definitely see Colby wearing him down and winning a decision. And I'm not underestimating Chimaev. It seems to me like at the moment his life he's very turbulent. And I don't know how his preparation is going to be for this one, and that concerns me a little bit. I genuinely hope he's okay. Like, genuinely. I don't know. Chimaev all effing day from a nobody. Nobody. That's a good name.
There's a couple of questions.
Oh, have we got questions, yeah?
That one.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Lucas T. Fitness.
Oh, I got B Awesome. I got a question from B Awesome. Bryce Mitchell versus Joe Rogan debate on the Earth being flat all round. I mean, I would love to watch that debate. I would love to watch it. Can't get my head around it, but it would be fascinating to watch. And Rogan's the right person to do it as well, because he's not going to make him feel really bad, but he is going to point it out and he's going to have a little bit of a laugh at it. Might be nice if Neil deGrasse Tyson was there to referee it. It's an odd thing. It's an odd thing. The Earth's flat. I genuinely have tried to get my head around making sense of it, but I don't know. It seems like the height of paranoia to me. Because everybody that says the Earth's flat has got some kind of conspiracy theory around why it's flat and who's controlling it being flat and why they're keeping this myth of it being a globe. I don't see what the difference is. You know what I mean? I don't see what the difference is. Is it a massive set? Is it Truman Show? Is it really? Holy shit! Imagine. Okay, I'll tell you. Here's a little story for you. A little story. One of the weirdest views that I've ever experienced. So as some of you will know, I did that boat race a few years ago where I sailed from London to Rio. 28 days at sea. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I would rather fight GSP 10 times over than do that again. It was very, very difficult. One of the highlights of it was doing a rig check at the top of the mast. And the mast was, I don't know how big it was, 100 meters maybe? No, that'd be too big, wouldn't it? 100 feet. There we go. That sounds about right. It was a decent height. Anyway, so they get you a hard hat and a harness, and they clip you into it, and they winch you up to the top of this thing, and then at the top you have to check all the pulleys and everything to make sure that everything's running right and nothing's wearing or coming loose or whatever. Because if you lose a sail while you're at sea, you're really, especially if you're racing, you're really down on your luck, and they're expensive to replace. Anyway. So I went up to the top of this rig and I'm doing another rig check and everything, and I just got a couple of minutes up there, because bear in mind I've been on a boat with a bunch of strangers for like 2 weeks at this point. This was the furthest away I've been from people for ages, and I'm not much of a people person. And I'm hanging there in this climbing harness on the top of this mast, rocking side to side, and you can imagine that the boat underneath me, which is like a 30-foot boat, is looking tiny. And there's nothing in any direction. There's no land. There's no nothing. And you can see the earth dropping away in every direction. it's the weirdest thing. You know, it's like those kind of like fisheye lenses, but just with the naked eye, you can literally see the curvature of the earth in every direction. And yeah, I mean, sunsets, sunrises. Anybody that's been out in the middle of the sea will know for sure that the earth is not flat. Well, I mean, I was going to be insulting them, but poor lad lives in a shed, I think.
There's a one from Lucas T Fitness.
Where's that one? What's Lucas saying?
It's just above. Let's scroll a bit further back up.
Oh, did I miss it?
It's after Adesanya retired from kickboxing, Pereira came a double glory kickboxing champ and a top 5 pound for pound fighter.
Yeah.
How much has Alex improved after Izzy?
How much has Alex improved after Izzy? I mean, he definitely developed into a much more dangerous kickboxer in the following fights. There's no doubt about it. But his game didn't change that much. He was able to refine his abilities into a skill set that he knew worked against the majority of the fighters he was up against. He still struggled with fighters like Yusri Belgari was a handful. Jason Wilness was always a handful for him. There have been times when he struggled in his kickboxing career, and I feel like, again, the leveler is that power. It's his ability to get close to people and land and do serious damage. I feel like Izzy moving over to mixed martial arts and refining his striking skills for the ranges of mixed martial arts and for the space in the octagon, which is very different to a boxing ring. I feel like that gives him a lot of advantages that Pereira is probably not even considered yet. You've also got to remember, like, Pereira is not going to be super comfortable with his grappling. I know he's been training with Teixeira, but that in that live fight moment, when you're throwing combinations and you see that person level change, that takes years and years to develop that level change. Which is why you get someone like Justin Gaethje, who's got great wrestling and he's striking relatively scrappy most of the time, especially before his 2 losses. His takedown defense is so good that he's able to make his striking really effective. It's almost better to have good wrestling and takedown defense than to have good striking in mixed martial arts and win striking matches because of it. Like, someone, there's a fight in Pereira's career. It was an MMA fight, and he couldn't put this guy away, and he was under a lot of pressure. He ended up getting choked out. It's a very different sport, a very different game, and I feel like the benefits that he would have had developing as a kickboxer may not necessarily serve him the same as a mixed martial artist. That's just my immediate thoughts on it, but it's a good question. We had a donation here, haven't we? I am somewhere. Where is Colby technically better than Chimaev? Striking, wrestling, submissions. That's a tough question to answer. I feel like Khamzat's got really good boxing fundamentals. I feel like Colby's got pretty decent striking, but he doesn't keep his head as safe as Chimaev the majority of the time. So his defense isn't necessarily as on point with his boxing. I would say he's probably got better kicks than Chimaev, but Chimaev used his kick really well to set up his level change. Was that against John Phillips? I think it was. Body kick to level change. Ultimately, I think it comes down to their durability. I think in all of those ranges, Chimaev is going to be able to push Colby back, hit him and hurt him, probably take him down and control him, and maybe even be able to submit him. But I feel like the process that he's going to have to go through to make Colby vulnerable to all those things to a point where he can get him out of the fight, I don't know whether Chimaev's got the durability, conditioning-wise, to get to that stage. I mean, everybody talks about how much of a beast he is in the gym, and I don't doubt it for a second. But when you're dealing with Colby Covington over 5 rounds, and Covington is never going to lose that confidence to keep himself in the fight, and even if the fight comes to an end, he's not going to accept it being a loss. That kind of mentality is incredibly strong, and it's the kind of mentality that thrives in the 4th and 5th round. And that's my big question about Chimaev right now is you know, what does he look like under the pace of Colby Covington if he's not able to do a lot of damage? Or if he takes him down, holds him down, and smashes him in the face, and does so much damage in the first round, even if he starts to gas after that, and he's done enough damage, you know, the doctor could potentially step in and stop it. But Colby's toughness and durability, I feel like, is the deciding factor in that one. Alejandro Gutierrez, with his cardio, what if Colby puts on muscle weight and moves up to middleweight? Do you think he can take on Bobby Knuckles and then Izzy? I would say that Usman's got a better shot of moving up and taking on the middleweight division. I do feel like Colby could be effective against some fighters in the middleweight division, but I also think if you stood him next to some of these guys, you would realize how small he is by comparison. I mean, he's a pretty average size welterweight. He's not much bigger than RDA, and RDA, of course, has fluctuated between lightweight and welterweight. I think if you put Covington next to Paulo Costa, he would look very, very small. And, you know, Whittaker, like, I'm not saying there aren't matchups in that division. Like, Covington against Gastelum could be a really fun matchup to watch. Covington against Brad Tavares, potentially even against Derek Brunson, because I feel like Covington's striking is better than Brunson's. Brunson always lunges in with his chin in the air, and he's got wrestling, of course. But if his wrestling runs out, that's when he starts to panic because his striking's so poor. So then you look at Colby Covington and you think to yourself, well, I think he could wrestle Derek Brunson until Brunson has to strike with him, and then Covington starts to win. It's just some of the other fighters in the division, I feel like he would be massively underpowered. I mean, Vettori might be a decent matchup for him. I could see him winning half of these matchups. He could potentially beat a Sean Strickland or a Jack Hermansson. It's just that very top of the division. I feel like he would look really small and be technically outclassed by Adesanya, and I don't know as he'd be able to take him down and hold him down, and keep a hold of him without getting stood up for inactivity. It's a good question, though. It's a good question, and you know, I wouldn't mind seeing, I've talked about it before, between the lightweight and welterweight division. I wouldn't mind seeing another weight class there. I also think we could definitely do with another weight class between welterweight and middleweight at some point. You've got to think all these weight classes are going to expand. We're going to need more weight classes between lightweight, welterweight, and middleweight because that's where the majority of fighters are. Covington, I mean, you know, Covington's the kind of fighter that could be a champion, one of those in between divisions. I don't know if he's big enough for middleweight though. Not to be the champ. Definitely to be a contender, though. Pain in the ass contender for most of them. Okay. Well, have I missed any questions? Only stunting. Oh, no, I think I've answered your question.
There's one a bit further up. Polidori's revenge.
Oh, yeah. Polidori was throwing dollar bills at me the other day.
Did you hear about Guru's community post and condition?
Community post and condition? I didn't see it. What was it about? Not sure. Sorry, Polly. Oh, here. Oh, okay, I found it. There we go. Did you hear about Guru's community post and condition? I didn't. Like physical condition. Like, is he unwell? I don't know. Oh, V's in the chat as well, answering people.
I've just got another one at the bottom. How do you think Usman against Yan would have gone?
Oh, yeah. I don't know, to be honest. Like, Jan's a big dude. He's a big, strong, powerful light heavyweight. He's got great kickboxing. You know, you could see he stood in the pocket with Adesanya and was able to cover and block most things. And he's a good grappler. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Usman would be able to take him down. We don't know what Usman would look like at that weight class either. I mean, it's not like Jan's coming down. So Usman would have had to go up to 205. I mean, I would imagine he's walking around the 200-pound mark anyway, but it's what he competes at like that. I mean, carrying that weight around over 25 minutes and trying to take Yan down over 25 minutes is a different thing entirely as well. I don't know if he'd be able to physically keep up with Yan on the floor over 25 minutes. I think he'd probably be able to take him down. And I don't know if Yan would put up too much of a fight because he feels like he's active off his back as well. I mean, he spent too long on his back against Gustafsson. He felt like he was going to land some kind of submission. I don't know. I would have rather seen Usman go up to middleweight, to be honest. I mean, you know, Usman against Paulo Costa would have been a banger. Usman against Marvin Vittori. Why not? I know he doesn't want to fight Adesanya, but then it'd be better probably for Adesanya to move back up to light heavyweight. I mean, imagine Adesanya against Yuri Prochazka. That'd be a lot of fun. That'd be a lot of fun.
Poll's still going as well.
Oh, is it? So what people saying? 59% Volkanovski.
723 votes.
Really? Yeah. Interesting. Oh, okay. I am somewhere. I asked about Colby technically versus Chimaev's wrestling, and then his submissions, and yeah, no, you're right. I did speak about his conditioning. Honestly, this is the thing. This is the thing about MMA, though. The thing that usually separates the fighters is their management of their conditioning. Like Charles Oliveira gets subbed when he gets tired, right? He wouldn't get subbed if he wasn't tired. It would be very, very difficult to sub him if he's not tired. Fatigue is the thing that cracks a lot of fighters. Like I feel like technically Chimaev would be able to take Colby down and bind his wrists and bind his legs and be physically strong enough to be able to, even if Colby's technically better slightly with his wrestling, which I feel like a constant flow wrestling, Colby would eventually score more points just because he's generally more active. But in an MMA situation where he can get trapped and stuck up against the fence, that's when the fight can be slowed down by a bigger, more powerful wrestler. So I feel like the wrist binding of Chimaev and the leg binding would make Colby carry a lot of his weight. And you'd see Colby frustrated and looking at the referee and blocking a few shots. But ultimately, I feel like that ability for Chimaev to take him down and hold him down with that physicality and that wrestling ability, I feel like that would be offset by the scrambling and the relentless conditioning of Colby Covington. The submissions for both of them are all dependent on their wrestling. Neither of these guys are slick jiu-jitsu players enough to be able to catch something off their back, either of these two guys. I just don't see it. Maybe wrong, but I just don't see it. So for me, the argument goes, okay, well, who's the better wrestler? Well, I think the stronger wrestler in the early round will be Chimaev, but I do feel like that wrestling control will change if the fight continues into the late second, third, fourth, fifth. That's then the point when the submissions come into conversation, because I think anybody can be submitted if they're tired enough. And I feel like if Covington's taken down and dominated in the first round, he gets punched in the face, Chimaev gets that face bar and squeezes, and Covington's still got pain in his jaw, I can definitely see that being a submission in the first round. But I think he's going to be very difficult to submit. And the question is, does Chimaev burn a lot of energy trying to hold him down and hit him and control him and submit him? Or does Covington outlast it, and is he able to then start turning the wrestling game on Chimaev? And then the same thing goes. Chimaev might start to get tired and beaten up and look frustrated. He might not be paying full attention or whatever, and that rear naked choke of Colby might jump under his neck. I think they've both got an equal enough ability of submitting people. It just happens at different points in the fight and due to different circumstances. If Chimaev takes him down and dominates him and submits him, it's because he's stronger and fresher and bigger. If Covington gets the submission, it's because he's outlasted and he's been able to turn the tide on him and wear him out and then submit him. I hope that answers your question, my friend. I feel like their wrestling is relatively equal, but the defining factor will be who can maintain it. And even if Chimaev can maintain it over 10 minutes, I feel like still that extra 15 minutes leans towards Colby. And I just don't see him getting that psychological, that discouragement from getting taken down. Because I think his psychology is one of the best parts of his game. I think he's incredibly resilient. Yeah, Colby has no submissions in the UFC, but it doesn't mean that submission, that rear naked choke, might not be available to him. Like this is the thing you have to remember is, like, sometimes opportunities present themselves on the ends of people's games because of how they fight. Covington is an exhausting fighter. What's he got? 4 submissions in his career. So yeah, rear naked choke against Jonathan Meunier. There you go. He lost by guillotine to Wally Alves, but yeah, no, he's got submissions there. He's got a rear naked choke against Wagner Silva, and he's got a rear naked choke against Jonathan Meunier. He's trying to throw me off here. I knew I'd seen those fights. Same thing, it's fatigue. Fatigue is going to be the deciding factor in that fight for me. Alejandro, most important question of all. When are you and Diego Sanchez dancing on Eagle FC? No pressure, but I can't wait to see the Mohawk back in the cage. Yeah, so Diego and I were supposed to be boxing November 12th. Unfortunately, that has been cancelled. I know Diego is keen to do bare knuckle, and I'm not against the idea. I could do with a few more scars on my face, given the fact that I didn't pick up many in my my MMA career. I'd consider Eagle FC. I'd consider. There's not anything I wouldn't consider, to be honest. I mean, I like Diego these days. We used to have a bit of a back and forth, and he didn't like me because I said he was getting worse, and we had I mean, he's mental, isn't he? Let's be honest. He's crazy. He always has been. Different variants and different volumes are crazy, but he's always been crazy. On the Ultimate Fighter House, he was meditating in the lightning storm, and he's an interesting dude. But I always thought we'd end up fighting. I always thought we did. We did a face-off. Where was I? Too Hot to Handle in Amsterdam. I was fighting on that card in a tournament, and he was there as a guest, and we had a face-off then. And even from that point, I thought to myself, I'm going to end up fighting this guy. For sure I am. And we just, for whatever reason, it never came about. But it might. MMA, I'd fight him under any rules, to be honest. MMA, boxing, bare knuckle, chess, whatever he likes. Sanyeld? Yeah, okay. Why fighters, in brackets, like Oliveira, for example, fight in weight divisions where the weight cuts have a dramatic effect on their conditioning? Is that common? Unfortunately, it is. The thing is, my very first introduction to weight cutting was one of my early taekwondo competitions, and we got there and stepped on the scales, and I was literally nothing over. And my teacher went, okay, run around the sports hall a few times and go to the toilet and then come back. And I had no idea why. No idea. Couldn't comprehend the idea that my weight was going to fluctuate in any way like that, especially when I was a kid. So I did it, ran round, got my heart rate up and everything, went to the toilet and came back, and I was in the low weight class. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And he was like, yeah, well, now you'll be fighting kids that are your size instead of the bigger kids in the next weight class up. And that was the first time it occurred to me. Then all the way through my kickboxing career, it was always you'll cut a bit to make weight, but ultimately you want to be quite close to your weight. You don't want to be cutting too much. Then in MMA, I was coming up against people that were like making an effort to cut weight more than they were to train for the fight. It seemed like it was like bragging rights. It was odd. It seemed like bragging rights. Oh, how much weight do you cut? Oh, I cut 18 pounds. I cut 20 pounds. And I got into it. I mean, I did do some weight cutting. I did 18 pounds in a day once. I think that was the most I did. I did 18 once. I did 14 once. But by the end of my career, I was doing sort of 6-8 pounds. I wasn't doing nearly as much. 6 or 8 pounds. But like when I fought Anthony Johnson, and this is why I was concerned about Charles Oliveira during fight week, because the last time I remember seeing someone looking that drawn on Tuesday of fight week and being in the sauna was when I fought Anthony Johnson. And I didn't win. I didn't beat him. He was still a real handful and a better wrestler than me, and I lost a decision. But I always thought to myself, Anthony Johnson, we're not seeing the best performances out of him because he's cutting so much weight. And I think after me, he went up to heavyweight and fought Andrei Arlovski and broke his jaw. And I thought to myself, like if I'd have fought him in a different weight class, he'd have taken my head off. Like even after when he fought Alex Gustafsson, knocked him out in Stockholm. I remember saying to him at the hotel afterwards, I said to him, I'm glad you didn't do that to me. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he went, yeah, but I like you. I'm like, oh, thank goodness for that. Like sometimes you can take too much out of you when you weight cutting. I've felt it before. I felt it walking up the steps into the cage before, and my legs felt heavy and my body felt dead. But then other times, I've been in there against someone and I didn't cut too much weight, and I've seen they've had a real struggle. Rory Markham, I knew he was on a ticking time bomb because of how much weight he'd cut. But then, like, there's another guy I fought called Danny Rushton. We'll have to post some of these videos on the channel at some point, Jamie. I fought a guy called Danny Rushton, and the whole thing with him is that he was chiseled out of iron, and he was massive. He cut loads of weight, and that was the big story going in. Oh, he was going to be so much bigger than me. So I made loads of I cut loads of weight on for that fight, and I knew going into that first round, I'm like, if I don't win this in the first round, I'm really going to struggle. I felt heavy. I felt really, really sluggish, and I was fortunate I did get the win in the first round, but I dread to think what I would have felt like in the second round. And I did cut a few times, but yeah. I think the only thing that's going to change it, the only thing that's going to change the weight cutting culture is for fighters themselves to realize that it's not a benefit to them. And I do think there is a benefit in being right at the top of the weight class. But if you're sweating out any more than sort of 5 or 6 pounds, you're trading the size advantage for a conditioning deficit. And of course, there are people, but I can do it and I can fight hard for 15 minutes or 25 minutes. Absolutely. But there's going to come a point when you fight somebody that is going to be able to push you past that. I wouldn't cut nearly as much weight if I was fighting again. I would probably be in a lower weight class anyway. Because I made an effort to be big at welterweight. But I don't know. I think we're going to see a shift in the next few years, and I think we're going to see more people fighting a bit closer to their weight. Because I think the competitiveness at the top of the divisions will get so great that you don't want to be at a physical deficit when you get into the later rounds, and the size advantage in the early rounds will be negated by the technical abilities of the fighters. So I do feel like weight cutting will be less of a thing in the future. But it's absolutely a thing right now, and it's not great. Oh, Veronica's getting all the attention. I'll have to get her on one of these live streams at some point. Lou, please like and subscribe for more Dan Hardy takes. Thank you, Lou. I always forget to say like and subscribe. Oh, hang on. I can watch the like button. I've just liked it. I'm 305. What number are you? It's cool to watch it like little roll up every time I ask people. Oh, there's 306. There we go. Chet Hanks. Please tell my friend Dark Side Phil to stop begging online for money 6 consecutive days a week. Why is he begging online for money? Why is he begging online for money? I mean, I'm kind of doing the same thing here. No, I appreciate all your donations. I really do. And your questions. I love answering questions for you guys. I am going to do this. I'm going to do it as much as I can. I'm going to try and do it. I'm going to try my hardest to do it every week. And I'll do aftermaths after the big events as well. But what we are doing on Halloween is we're going to launch our memberships, because I want to build that slightly smaller community where we can have some really good deep conversations. There's some more, technical and philosophical conversations that I want to get into, and we've got more content, archive, dark room, and then members only live chats, so we can have a little chin wag together. We're going to be launching that Halloween, right? Halloween. Is that Monday? Tuesday? Monday. Yeah, here we go. Happy Halloween, everybody. Oh, I should wear my contact lenses. FY Entertainment. Advice for a 23-year-old looking to get into MMA. Do it. Get into it. Get into it. There are so many gyms around. Where are you? FY Entertainment? There are so many gyms around the world now. You can walk into the majority of gyms and find someone that has been competing in MMA or has got jiu-jitsu grades or has got Muay Thai experience or has got kickboxing experience or whatever. Like, just go and do it, honestly. Most gyms you're going to walk into, you're going to meet some really cool people that are just as kind of excited and unsure as you are. And you'll love it. You'll love it, especially that first 6 months when you're starting something new. I remember because I'd been doing martial arts for a while when I first started like properly training grappling. And I remember how quickly I was learning because it was all new. I was just gathering information. It's like you're on this roller coaster, and then all of a sudden it starts to slow down. You feel like you plateau, and that's when the people in the gym make the difference, because they're the ones that you keep going back for. Like one of my favorite places to train always was 10th Planet, because I had a sublet down the road or a shitty little motel sometimes, and I'd walk down Sunset Boulevard or Hollywood Boulevard. I'd get there just as the sun was setting and everyone was gathering on the mats for the 10th Planet session, and Eddie would run it like, it was wicked, but like clockwork. Do this, do this, do this. We're in this position. Go live. And everybody was in the same. It was just such a vibrant environment. If someone did something new or they found something that worked, the class would stop and everyone would talk about it. Rogan would come in and he'd be doing back kicks on the bag over in the corner and rattling the whole building. It was just a great environment to train in, and so finding the right gym and the right people is a big thing. So good luck with that. But please do, FY Entertainment, get into it and do your conditioning. That's my advice for everybody that's getting into MMA that wants to fight, because you'll enjoy it so much more if your conditioning's better. The point when you start making bad decisions, and this goes back to the conversation about Chimaev and Colby. When we're sitting watching on the sofa, you can see where they're going wrong. If you're the guy in the stands at the football pitch, you can see where they're going wrong. But you're also not the one doing all the running around, all the ducking and blocking and kicking and stuff. And fatigue decreases your ability to, first of all, process what's in front of you, second of all, to think, and third, to execute. So get some conditioning done, because it will be the foundation of your game always. And you can see how much of a weapon it can be against people as well. Oh, hang on a minute. We've got two more. What we got here? Trent Presley. What a cool name. What a cool name. I mean, if you're not a rock star, then well, it's time for a career change, my friend. Trent Presley. Like Trent Reznor and Elvis Presley together. There we go. 9 Inch Nails. Okay. How do you see Cheeto versus Aljo and Sean versus Corey going? It'd be nice to see a rematch between Cheeto and Sean for the belt. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see a rematch between those two. I think Cheeto versus Aljo is really fun because Cheeto's not bothered about wrestling or grappling. He's quite happy to grapple. He's great at keeping scrambles going and staying aggressive, and he's also very aggressive, very dominant with his footwork and his striking. And that, to me, makes Aljo uncomfortable. Like, the reason why I thought he was going to struggle against TJ was because TJ Dillashaw's got the footwork and pressure to back him up and maybe slip him onto one of those kicks. The difference with Cheeto is that he can step in with those knees and those elbows and those low kicks, and he'll take a real pleasure in beating his opponent up. Aljo looked so dominant in that first round against TJ. I wonder what TJ would. I wonder how the fight would have been if TJ had had both of his shoulders in that first round. But the physical strength and pressure that Aljo was able to put him under, I mean, he could literally do that to anybody in the division. I think it's just about, if he can take him down and he can maintain, then he can keep him there. If he comes up against someone like Cheeto that can stuff a takedown or scramble back to his feet or threaten him on the floor, it becomes more chaotic for him. I like that fight. I'm not sure which way I go right now. I'd maybe lean slightly towards Aljo based on the fact that Cheeto can be overly aggressive and might get outpointed. Sean against Corey, I spoke a bit about earlier. I think this point over 5 rounds, I think Corey wins. I think Corey beats him over 5 rounds at this point. But it doesn't mean to say that he won't develop into a fighter that is able to compete. I just feel like Corey's slightly ahead of him. Technically, fight IQ, maturity, movement. We'll see. It's a great division, though, bantamweight at the moment, isn't it? You know, you got Marab in there as well, haven't you? You can't forget about him. Kid's a lunatic. Yeah, and I don't know whether we're going to see TJ Dillashaw back. What are your thoughts on that? Are we going to see him again? I'm not so sure. Okay. I think I got another question, didn't I?
Yeah, it was just below that one, I think.
Chet Hanks. That sounds like a... Oh, no, I've done this question already. That sounds like a movie star name, though, doesn't it?
There was another one from Alejandro Gutierrez.
Danny, thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. Just joining, hanging out in the conversation, no question. Feel free to ask me a question there, Danny, if you've got one. Okay. How do you see Belal versus Colby and Islam versus Khabib? And Islam and Khabib versus the 170 top 5. Belal versus Colby is a really interesting matchup based on Belal's recent performance. I mean, I don't know what level he's going to reach to now, because I kind of felt like he'd peaked and he'd plateaued, and now after seeing that, I felt like he's found another level to his game with the help of Khabib. Belal could certainly be problematic for Colby. It could certainly be, but again, Colby over 5 rounds has that condition in the tank, and I feel like that's the leveler for the majority of these welterweight fights. The pace that Colby fights at wears people down, breaks them eventually. Now, if there's anybody that can prepare Belal Muhammad for the pressure of Colby Covington, it's going to be heavyweight Khabib. And I do feel like Khabib coming back into the welterweight division, from what we've heard, I think he'd be an absolute nightmare. But I've got high hopes for Belal Muhammad now. I think moving towards Khabib and his team was a really smart move, and I think it added something to his game technically as well as his confidence, and that was the overriding factor in that fight against Sean Brady. Islam and Khabib versus the welterweight top 5. I mean, ultimately you could put Islam in there against a lot of these guys, and I think he's going to be an absolute nightmare. Islam against Colby would be a fascinating one. Islam against Gilbert Burns would be an interesting one as well, because Burns has got that jiu-jitsu game, and he's powerful and he's strong and he's got a big right hand, but he also used to be a lightweight, so he's not going to be massively undersized. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me at all if we see Makhachev move up to welterweight eventually and start competing for the belt, especially if that division shifts around a bit, because I feel like something could open up. Like, there's a few guys in that welterweight division, the likes of Stephen Thompson and Masvidal, that are going to be even Michel Pereira is at number 15. I feel like there are a few guys that are going to move out that division. It's going to create some space. And if Makhachev beats Oliveira in a rematch, and then he takes out maybe 2 or 3 of the other contenders, like, is Porier going to get another title shot if he beats Chandler? Would he win if he did get a title shot? If Chandler beats Porier, do you put him up towards a title shot? I think this lightweight division might slow down a little bit if Makhachev beats Oliveira, and I think we might be waiting for a Tsarukyan or a Gamrot to make the progress towards the belt, which might leave Makhachev the opportunity, the option to go up to welterweight. Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Tad Cooley. This is the chat with names today. About to be in London as well as the UK from this Sunday till November 18th. Are there any pubs or restaurants in London that you recommend me go to? I have not been in many pubs in London, but there was one pub I used to go in quite a lot. If I remember right, it's called the Crowbar. It's my kind of pub. It was next to a really big bookshop, right in Soho. Crowbar. Have you heard of it?
I've not heard of it.
It's a good spot. It's a good spot. It's just like a little dive bar with a really good jukebox in the back. That's where I'd go anyway. But you'd be spoiled for it in London. And if you're in the UK, if you make your way up to the Midlands, make sure you go and check out the Trip to Jerusalem in Nottingham, because it is the oldest pub in the country. It's built into a cave. It's pretty amazing. They used to supply the castle with alcohol, mead, I would imagine it was. Tad, enjoy your trip. London's awesome. It's one of the best cities that you'll ever visit. It's very, very cool. And everyone's really friendly. And if you're not sure where to go, get in one of the black cabs, one of the traditional taxis in London. The people that drive those, they make a career out of guiding people around the city. They're really cool. Whenever I'm in the city, if I'm not sure where I'm going, I always jump in one of those and ask a question. I want to go to this kind of place. I want to see this kind of thing. And they'll go, I know where, blah, 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 blah. And they're very, very cool. Okay. I think we're about there, aren't we? Lou. That's where Dan went to scrap at the little old dive bar. Yeah, not that one. Couple in Nottingham though for sure. Always one quick jumped in here. Kevin. Will securing the first round become more important going forward, since a lot of recent close fights have come down to who won the first round? Yeah, it's a good question, Kevin. And honestly, this is why we need 5 rounds with top flight contenders. Like, I don't think you should ever be able to get a title shot based on 2 things. You have to step on the scales at 150. Okay, we're talking about lightweight. I just realised I was going off on a tangent without defining my tangent. So, pit and pendulum's a good spot. Yes, Mikey D. Is that your stomach growling, Jamie? My goodness, Jamie's hungry. We're going to have to wrap this in a minute. In a 3-round fight, if you lose the first round, you have to win the next 2 rounds, right? Now, if you're fighting for a title, we need to see you compete over 5 rounds. I don't think people should get title shots after only fighting 3 rounds. I also don't think anyone should get a title shot unless they step on the scales the fight before on championship weight. Because the last thing you want is someone stepping on the scales at 156 and then making 155.5 and not being eligible for the title. That's why it's always a statement when someone is close to a title shot, they step in, they go, championship weight. I am on championship weight, I am ready. And also proving yourself over 5 rounds, I think is a value. Even if you don't have to fight 5 rounds, being matched up in a position where you know that there's a possibility for 5 rounds is, I think, a very important process to go through. Because your training camp's different. You know, your preparation for a 5-rounder is different to a 3-rounder. And I think going through that process and preparing for those additional 2 rounds is something that everyone should go through. Everyone that's going to be a contender or a coach. That didn't really answer your question, though, did it? So, yeah, I mean, and this is the problem with the rounds being 5 minutes and there only being 3 of them. You've got to win the first round. Otherwise, you put you back into a corner where you know you've got 10 minutes left and you have to win that both 5-minute brackets. This is why when I was talking about the Yan O'Malley fight, I felt like it was such a different fight over 3 rounds, and that's why it lent towards Sean O'Malley. Yeah, it's just a different thing. It's a different thing. This is why boxing for me is interesting, because in boxing you get 12 rounds. So you get 12 3-minute fights. So each round is a fight in itself. And once that fight has happened, it gets scored and it goes in. And it doesn't affect any of the other rounds until the decision's arrived. Right? The only thing that will affect the other rounds is the damage that's done in those previous rounds. And that can sometimes people will lose the round but do enough damage in the first round to be able to take control in the second and third. But those long form game plans are still far better over 25 minutes. It'd be interesting to see MMA with, like, imagine doing MMA over 3-minute rounds. My goodness, Jamie's hungry. Like if we were doing them over 3-minute rounds, then you'd have another bracket where you'd have to score, and then another bracket where you'd have to score. Like sometimes I'll go through and score the rounds per minute, and I know that sounds like an odd thing to do, but I do like to see the sway back and forth in a round. Sometimes you'll get someone that wins the first, the third, and the 5th minute, and sometimes you'll get someone that comes in, coasts for the first 2 minutes, and then wins the 3rd, 4th, and 5th minute in the round. There's different ways of expending energy, but that's a part of being a champion. Like Aldo was never a 25-minute fighter. He fought over 25 minutes, but he fought for 20 minutes of the 25. And you can go back quite consistently into his career and see that. He'll take a round off at some point. He might win the first 2, just make sure they're in the bag, and then he's only got 1 more to win out the next 3. Sometimes he'll win the first 3, and then he knows he's good, and then he'll take the 4th off and then switch it back on in the 5 just to make sure. Against Mark Hominick, you'll see he goes 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Luke can hear your stomach growling, Jamie. It's not even mic'd up. It's crazy. Against the Hominick fight, he went 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, and Hominick had that big alien swelling on his forehead, and Aldo just didn't do anything in the 5th round. It was wild because it gave the whole arena a lift because we were in Canada, but yeah, it's something you have to consider, and it's even more difficult, I think, when you go from fighting 5 rounds to then fighting 3, because you have to shift your pace. You have to change it entirely. It's a different thing. Liam, would Jan's cut have become more of an issue in the later rounds? I mean, I think it would have done. It was to the side of his eyebrow. It would have continued to bleed. If it was going into his eye or if he was starting to wipe at it, they would have brought the doctor in to check it. You know, it's always dangerous when you've got a cut around your eye, because then it's dependent on what the doctor thinks. Like the doctors aren't consistent. You go into a city like Nevada, where a state like Nevada, where they have fights all the time, your face can be hanging off, and then you go into somewhere like, you know, into like one of the states that they don't have big MMA matches too much, and it could be stopped on a cut that in a different. We've seen it before. Like, what was it that Dana was saying about the Diaz Masvidal fight? That was in New York. Had that happened in Vegas, it may not have been stopped. Like, I remember us doing an event in Shenzhen, China, and we were told before the event started that if there was too much blood, that they would just stop the event, like the event, because it was too much for TV. There's a lot of kind of, what's the right word? There's no firm, this is a cut that stops a fight and this is a cut that is okay to continue with. Like, there was even a female fighter, she got cut on her nose and the doctor stopped it. If that was a different fighter, they wouldn't have stopped that fight. And it was a lovely knee that caught him as well. My goodness, there's lots of questions coming through now. But as you can hear, Jamie's digesting himself from the inside. What's the...
Well, there's one...
Hang on, what's...
One question. I think it was a donation.
Oh, okay.
How relevant is Volk playing rugby at £214?
Oh, how relevant is it?
Yeah.
How relevant is it Volkanovski used to play rugby at £214? Well, I think it's really relevant, because... And what you'll notice with people that used to operate their body at a different weight, like Jared Cannonier is a good example, used to be a heavyweight. Generally, people that have been heavier, whether it's muscle mass or just body weight generally, they've been moving around weights that they now don't have on their frame, which is what makes them far more explosive. Like, and I think Jared Cannonier is a good one. I'm not veering off Volk, but I think it is applicable, because Volk, of course, was more heavily muscled when he was at 215 pounds. But of course, he had probably a bit of body fat on him as well to protect him from those tackles. If you think of that additional weight on him, the muscle mass that is under that weight is carrying that weight, which means that muscle mass is having to work a little bit harder to do the same thing as it's doing now. But now it doesn't have to work as hard because it doesn't have that muscle mass on it or that weight on it. Like, Jared Cannonier moved very quickly as a heavyweight, but then you take off that 40-pound weight vest that he was wearing, and you've got that plyometric result of his body being far more explosive. Now it's at a lighter weight, and you know, he's also been able to take big tackles from bigger guys as well. He's a durable, tough individual. I feel like his speed and his power now is in large part down to the fact that he used to move around at a much bigger weight. It must feel like a different animal entirely. What's the orange plastic thing on the left of Dan's head? Are you talking about this? This is a 3D printed T-Rex skull. Not a full size one, as you can imagine. I'm not that big, but it's yeah. Still haven't done that tour of the room, have I, Jamie? I've got all kinds of cool stuff in here. I mean, really, I have. It is literally just full of cool stuff. Looks weird, to be honest. It looks weird. To be honest. Having a skull on the thing looks weird. Well, if you think that's weird, you probably think the whole bloody room's weird. Okay. Jan versus Mighty Mouse. Be a good fight. Be a really good fight. In fact, of course, Jan would be a flyweight in one championship, wouldn't he? As long as he's hydrated at the bantamweight limit. Yeah, I don't know. Mighty Mouse is brilliant. He really is fantastic. Impresses me every time. Ali. Sean Shelby is close friends with O'Malley, by the way, and there's no commission in UAE. Tin foil hat time. Tin foil. I ain't got a tin foil hat in here. It's in the other room. We'll have to stick with this one. Yeah, look, there is no athletic commission in the United Arab Emirates, and it's important that all of these regions of the world where the UFC are going as an athletic commission, because you need someone holding these things down, pointing things out when they go wrong, and they do go wrong. I'll elaborate on that at some point in the future. Right. Dan has so many toys and strange things in there. It trips me out. He should get rid of those for the studio. Where would I put them if they weren't in the studio? Can't remember anywhere else in the house. All the other rooms in the house are filled with either boxing gloves or Lego. So, I mean, this is my action figure room. No commission. Yes. I would have added a couple more M's on the end of your though. Yeah. It's important to have a commission. Okay. I think it's time to wrap it there, Jamie. Your stomach's rambling and mine's rumbling. And okay. John D. I will get into that question another time, my friend. They are the kind of questions that I am talking about for the Uncensorship, the membership channel, because there's lots of things I want to be talking to you guys about, and it's not quite as easy on these all open. Put them in your bedroom. There's no room in the bedroom. It's full of Lego and crystals. Did I watch Jurassic World Domination, and what did I think? I haven't watched that. No, I haven't, honestly. I'd rather go back and watch the very first one. Nobody likes it. What's going on? Oh, apparently E.T. was a junkie. Apparently Mystery's an MMA guru superfan. Mystery's been up at Cowbon today. Not Cowbon. Next Gen. He's been up at Next Gen with Molly and Paddy. I can't wait to see what he gets. Yeah, Mystery's a hardcore MMA fan, as we all are. You know, people like different... he's telling me to say bye. People like all different types of content, and Mystery likes that kind of madness. Anyway, mate, I'm not surprised. FY Entertainment, what martial art should I start with? Get into MMA. You can just do MMA now. Just do MMA. Get some grappling, get some striking. Suck it and see. See what you like and gravitate and build your game around it, because that's the best thing about MMA is it's so broad. You want to be a striker, you want to be a grappler, you want to be a dominant wrestler, ground and pound fighter, you want to strangle people or roll for people's ankles, try to steal the socks, whatever you like, you can do it in mixed martial arts. So try all of it and see what spikes your interest. MMA Slam podcast. Don't watch Halloween Ends. Get a root canal instead. Okay, right. Thank you everybody for joining the live stream. One Credit Classic. See you at Cage Warriors, mate. Thank you for joining us. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your questions. Appreciate your donations. I'll see you next time.